Hello folks, welcome to the canal channel Jose. Today we're going to give you an idea how to replace a front bearing on a 91 to a 94 Toyota Tercel. The bearing is the same for the passenger or driver side, and for today we already have taken off the wheel. Our car is resting on a jack stand, so we are going to have to remove the spindle completely off the car so we can replace the bearing. And for that, all we need is just the spindle off the car. So then you're going to need a press to push the bearing out and put the new one back in. So with that, we're going to show you, and hopefully this process helps you and give you an idea how to do it. This is the first step that we're going to have to do. Remove the nut for the dry shaft. So we're going to have to take that for the CV axle. We're going to have to remove that nut, and after that we're going to have to take all this off and start taking everything apart so we can extract the spindle and we can work with that on the press. So first we have to get this cutter pin off of there that goes from one side to the other side, and then we're going to have to take this locking device that keeps these two, keep the knot from spinning so it doesn't loosen itself, and then we're going to have to remove that and then remove that nut. We're going to use a 30mm socket with an impact wrench and take this nut off and loosen it, because this is the dry shaft that comes through the spindle. We have to take that off first. So now that we have removed the CV axle nut, the 30mm, now we can take this one off, rack and pinion, tie rod in, and then we can take this pin off and take that nut off so we can undo this, so we can start peeling off the stuff around the spindle. And to take this nut, this is a 17mm socket for this nut. Okay folks, so I don't have the ball joint tool where you can to split him. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit right on the side of the spindle where this goes into, the tie rod end goes into, because if you hit it from the bottom, you're gonna flatten that out, and then when you try to put it back on and thread it in, it's not gonna work because the threads are all flattened out. So what you wanna do is hit it here. If you don't have a tool, you hit it right about here, so that with the hits it breaks it off. And then what you can do is you can try to fit some WD-40 in there as well to help out. So now that you have removed the tie rod end from this end, what you can do is we can start taking the caliper off completely from the spindle, so we can remove the disc brake as well, because we have to get all this stuff off of it. And then we're going to concentrate after that on the shock. So let's take off the caliper. That's a 17mm bolt right back here, not this one, back here, and there's another one back there. Okay folks, so what I have done is I have tied the whole caliper structure to the spring of the shock or the strut, and then that way it's not hanging in the hose or the brake line. It's going to get all the weight and then it's going to damage itself. So you want to hang it from the spring, and that way it's helping you get it out of the way. So now we continue with brake disc off, and then we can start undoing the ball joint on the bottom, and then the last one will be the bolts on the strut, and then we can start pulling our spindle off. So now that you have removed your disc brake, now what you can do is get back down here and remove the two 14mm nuts and the one 14mm bolt for the ball joint, the lower ball joint, so you can take it off of the control arm, because it's really hard to get this ball joint out of here from the spindle on the top from the spindle. So we take it off from the control arm. So now what we have to do is we have to remove those two 14mm nuts and the one bolt to get the ball joint off of the lower control arm. That will give us access to remove the spindle from the control arm on the lower side, and then we can move up to the strut. Okay folks, so now we have the lower ball joint off. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to take off the strut two bolts that hold to the spindle, and then those are 19 millimeters. So once we take those off, and then we just extract or spindle off so the drive shaft stays on the car. So now we have just one bolt in there holding the whole spindle into the strut. So we remove the tie rod end, the lower bolt joint, and now this bolt, so it comes out. The drive shaft is just gonna be guided in. So we're just gonna extract it slowly. Okay, folks, so now that you have your spindle like this, you got the where the tire will bolt on to. We have to get this sheet metal or this backing guard or piece of metal off. So we gotta loosen this, and this other bolt. They require a T30 socket like this. So we loosen them and take those bolts off. Okay, folks, so we're at the point where we're about to press out our bearing, but for this process you're gonna need a press, and we're using a 20-ton press, and this is just a regular bottle jack and a regular press, nothing fancy. So it's a 20-ton though. So we're gonna be showing you how we're gonna be pressing it out and how we're gonna set it on the press to press this bearing out. This is the critical point, taking it out and putting the new one in. This is the most important part of the whole process. So with that, we're gonna show you where we're putting all the tools and how we're setting it and where we're gonna press, so you get an idea. Okay, folks, so this is how we have set up our press. So we have put this tool right in between the spindle, where the spindle is and the lug nuts are, is right in between. As you can see, that's how we have set up, because we're gonna press this guy. We're gonna show you. We're gonna have to push right here, the center piece. This piece is gonna have to, this is the bearing, the silver one, and this piece has to go out that way. So we're gonna have to press, and we have put a 1-inch socket over it like that, and you press it out so it goes the other way. So we have pressed out this half out, and we end up with 3 pieces. That's the sheet metal, the splash guard. So this guy was right in here like this, pressed with this guy holding it in. So this is the actual piece that was pressed into the bearing. See, as you can see, this is how it's supposed to be, and then we had to press it out from this guy, but it wouldn't go through because the bearing, the other half, is in there. So now that we have pressed it out, we have the other half of the bearing. We're gonna have to press out the other half of the bearing, the outer shelf, and there's a seal here, and there's another seal here that needs to be replaced. So we're gonna replace both of those, but we're gonna have to extract the bearing first. Now what we do is we take both seals from the inner and outer side so we can start working on the other half of the bearing. So what I recommend is, don't worry about the seals, just bring them out and then just put in brand new, because if these are damaged and you put a brand new bearing, you try to reuse them, you're gonna have a problem soon. So don't worry about it, just put them brand new. So we'll take those out. It's a lot of work, just trying to save $2-3, and it's gonna get you another headache soon. So just don't worry about it, bring them out. So now that we have pulled both seals, the outer and inner seal, we can extract our bearings, half of the bearings. We can pull them out so we can have the shelf, the outside shelf by itself. So we extract that out. So now that we have removed the bearings, we end up with this piece. And now to extract the middle piece or the shelf, the outer shelf of the bearing, we have to remove this cutter, this pin, and this goes all the way around in a groove. So we have to pull this out so we're able to press the other half of the bearing, this inner wise, like if it was being pressed from the outside in. But to do that, we have to remove the pin. So remove that so we can start pressing out the outer shelf of the bearing from the spindle. One thing I want to say, folks, is that when you're compressing this ring, this pin or ring, when you're actually compressing it to clear it out of that groove so it clears out the walls and you bring it out, be careful, because if it comes loose from the tool that you're using, it can go flying like a spring and it can hit you in the eye. So be careful, control it. If you grab it, bring it out slowly, and then be careful. That's one safety I want to tell you guys about that. Okay, folks, so now what we have going on here is that we have a socket that barely fits inside where we're going to be pressing in the other half of the bearing out. And then on the other side, we have another socket that is bigger, that is just holding around this. And due to the height of it, help us to be flush or even, so this offset of the spindle doesn't hit the press, and so we are able to keep it even so we can press it in a smooth transition. This is going to eventually touch this guy, so until we touch that, then we'll switch methods. But to start, we want to start with something rigid, so we put a lot of pressure into it, so we press into it. And I want to say, folks, that this is where your engineering comes in play, because you wouldn't have all the tools. So you're going to have to find a way to press these bearings out, and you're going to have to look around your shop and your toolboxes to find what you can use. I'm using one big socket and another smaller socket to do this job. But like I said, you might not have this specific tool, so you're going to have to improvise. This is where your engineering comes in. So now we broke the bond of the spindle in the outer shelf of the bearing. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to release the pressure. We're going to get this socket out of here. We're going to put a bigger tube or pipe. So we're just going to press it completely out. But to begin, we have to use something really heavy duty to put pressure into it. So now that we have done that, we'll show you how much we have traveled. As you can see how much it has to slide off of the outer shelf, so that piece has to come out. But now we have to put a bigger tube or pipe outside, so this comes through all the way. So we do that. So now what I have done, folks, is I have to put a piece of wood in a lower piece, so I offset the height in the low side because I don't have a wood. So you have to improvise, but we're gonna still keep pushing onto the socket. So we keep pushing, so we extract the other half of the bearing out. So now that we have extract or pushed out the half of the bearing, what we can do is we can start pushing the new bearing half into it. So we push it back in, but the new side. So we put grease inside the hub and then outside the bearing, but we have to take half of it so we can press it in.